Welcome to the Live Media Commentary Show that answers the question, just how hard is it to kill your own son? Subscribe if you're new to the channel because today we are reviewing the film The Road. And I'm being joined by my illustrious guest host, Chris. How you doing, man?
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on. It's rare that you encounter a movie or a book that hits you so profoundly. So
Yeah.
I was excited to talk to you about it. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So what were your initial thoughts of this film?
Just wow. I mean, I saw your review, which was glowing and appropriately so.
Of the novel, right?
Of the novel,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah. And I did the audiobook on Monday, and it was so profoundly meaningful to me. Just in so many ways, the love of a father and a son. So then I decided to watch the movie. And the movie, although not as good, and there are some differences if we have time, of some of the things I feel like they dropped the ball on. But for the most part, the movie was also just hit you right in the feels. And it's like, it's Thursday, it's 3 days later, and I'm still thinking about it like throughout the day. So just one of those rare pieces of art that's hit you.
Yeah, I've seen this movie maybe twice a year since it came out. And it's just one of those films that is always in the back of my mind whenever, because it's a sort of a genre type show where it's sort of post-apocalyptic / survival type film. And so anytime you get like a 20 Days Later or you get like a Last of Us type of show, this film always sticks in the back of my head. So I figured I might as well read the book. And then, of course, after reviewing the book, I figured I might as well do the movie. You shared some interest in it. And so let's do this. And I just desperately love the show. So if you're looking for us to sort of just dump all over this is probably not the video for you. Because whereas you don't go into this film thinking, I'm going to feel great afterward. You definitely are going to feel something, I think.
For sure.
Whether it's horror, or whether it's shock, or whether it's depression, or whatever it is, you'll feel something. So this was originally released September 3rd, 2009. It was pushed back, I think, 2 full years after it finished wrapping up filming. It was directed by John Hillcoat, who had optioned this before the novel actually was published. He read the novel and then reached out to the author. The screenplay was by Joe Penhall and is based on The Road by Cormac McCarthy, of course. So I do want to call out really quick, the cinematography was done by Javier... Oh boy, Aguirre Saroba. Sorry, dude. I thought you did a great job with what you're given. And the music was by Nick Cave. I'm a big Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds fan, and Warren Ellis, which was nice. And the music is so subtle, I don't think you really notice it with what's happening on screen.
Yeah, definitely. If I heard it outside of the movie, I don't know if I would recognize it. Yeah. But then again, thinking back to the movie, and I just rewatched the ending again last night. It definitely, like you said, it's subtle, but it's perfectly done. It doesn't overtake anything, but it puts you right in that mood of experiencing what the characters are going through.
Yeah, it's similar to a score in my mind is like The Social Network, where 9 Inch Nails, Trent Reznor and someone else, I can't remember who else it was, sorry, scored that whole film. Like sort of that Trent Reznor sort of ambient melodic sound when it comes to film scores, and so I thought it really worked well. The budget of this film was $25 million. It only made $27.6 million, so it didn't even cover its marketing costs or anything.
That's a shame.
Yeah, especially when you reflect on how many awards it was nominated for, which is in the 20 range, and it won 3 or 4 of them. And so you think in terms of like the celebration of the film by critics after it was released does not match up to what people actually thought watching it. And
because the book had a lot of awards, right?
Yeah, it did. So on IMDb, it's given a 7.2 out of 10, which is really good. In Rotten Tomatoes, it was 74% certified fresh, which is pretty good, but only a 68% audience score. And I think that's reflected by the subject matter more than the quality of the film. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's at the end of the movie, to me, and I'm surprised that you watch it as frequently as you do. As much as I loved it, I feel like I would need a couple of years before watching it again, just because of how emotional. It's almost like reminiscent of the movie Logan, to
Oh
me,
gosh, that
which
was so
I
good.
loved Logan,
Yep.
but at the end it's like,
Just waterworks.
yeah, like I'll wait a few years, and so good
Yeah.
for you for watching it twice a year. Yeah,
I am one of those weirdos that likes feeling down sometimes, and so it just sort of helps me in my head for whatever reason. And so yeah, I don't disparage anyone that never wants to see it again after watching it the first time because I get it. But I'm
yeah,
just one of those people that likes pain, I guess. I'm a little masochistic there. So it was actually Viggo Mortensen plays the man. Of course, there's no real names. There's only one name in it, and that was Eli, and that's not even the real character's name. So Viggo Mortensen was man, Cody Smith McPhee was boy, and Charlize Theron was woman, the mother. And one huge departure from the novel was the amount of time spent on reflection about mother or woman. And I think as far as a film goes, it needed it. Was it too much for
yeah.
you, or did you feel like it worked?
Um, to me, the only part that I was a little critical on in the movie part is they showed the boy as being almost the same age as he was throughout the rest of the movie.
Right.
Now, maybe that was just because they wanted to stick with the same child actor,
Yeah.
but in my head, the mother had left relatively early on. It just doesn't seem believable to me that the mother would go through the entire childbearing years raising him, and then at the age of 8, would you say he's like 8 to 10 in
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
And then leave him at that point. It
Right.
just, that seems strange to me. In my head, she left much earlier. And maybe I'm wrong. And in the book, it does kind of indicate that she was with them for that long. But
That's a good
that,
point.
yeah.
I think that's totally fair. I'd never considered it. And I wonder if it's because you read the book first and then watched the movie second. I watched the movie first, then read the book. I wonder if that sort of influences our perception a little bit. Because when
That's
I was
true.
watching it, I didn't think twice until now you noticed that you mention it. And now I'm like, oh yeah, like the only real difference is his length of his hair. And so that would be
Right.
like months. And that's not enough time. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
it is.
yeah.
I don't know. It's just in my head. I'm with you. Because I always thought the justification of the mother leaving was a mixture of the way I justified it in my head was postpartum depression and the reality that there is no future, like at all. And they, in the conversations they had in the film, they were alluding to the idea that all their friends were killed off and murdered and raped and, dead and eaten. And so if that's the future you expect out of a child, like she didn't even want to bring the child into life. Like even when she was
Right.
pregnant, she was like, "We can't do this. What are we bringing him into?" It was just a throwaway line, but it's a really important line in order to get into her mind because she was not for this at all once whatever that catastrophe was hit.
Right.
Do you think it was important to see those glimpses of before the catastrophe to really contextualize where they are now?
I definitely do. I feel like it just made it more realistic. You needed to show that bond
Yeah.
that was there within the family in order for you to feel something when it's ripped away
Yeah.
with the mom. And those conversations that he had with her, trying to plead with her to stay,
yeah.
was just heart-wrenching. And
So great.
in my head, she may have also had some sort of mental issues because he does allude to "you're talking crazy again."
Yeah.
He does use that phrase, which, by the way, never say that to a woman.
Yeah.
It's never a good sign.
Yeah.
You're talking crazy again. They don't like that. But so I thought it was almost alluding to the fact that there are no medications anymore. There's
Interesting.
no,
Yeah, I
I
like
thought
that.
maybe that's something to that too. Like you have to live in a world where you're completely on your own. There's no doctors, there's no medicine, there's no mental health. It's just what you're born with or what you could take with you, So I thought maybe there was something to that.
Nice.
Yeah.
I did interpret it this last time I watched it on Monday, just randomly, and it was just funny that you reached out afterward, where I was like watching it this time because in the past I never thought about it. I just thought it was a throwaway line. She's in a position where she's talking about killing herself and her kid. That's crazy, and so he's saying you're talking crazy. But this
Yeah.
time I watched it, I did think, oh, you're gaslighting her. Why are you doing that? Like she's seriously suffering from a mental issue. I'm attributing it to postpartum depression and the reality of the world. It could be literally anything. Why are you gaslighting her like that? you have to be able to put yourself, especially if it's your partner, in their shoes to really understand where they're coming from. And just by dismissing their feelings or the way they're behaving as crazy is sort of 1950s 40s view of, you know, men and women, where, oh, she's being hysterical, let's just put her in an institution. Like,
Yeah,
it's just
yeah,
crazy stuff. Definitely don't ever tell anyone you, man or woman, anyone you love, don't ever tell them they're crazy because they're suffering for something.
right.
What do you think about the casting?
So I mean, you can't go better than Viggo Mortensen. So I mean,
Glad you
that
took
was
that stance.
yeah,
'Cause
that
you're
was
gonna
just
fight
perfect.
otherwise. I love
I
him.
mean, 5 minutes into the movie, I forgot that he was in Aragorn and, you know, Lord of the
Yeah.
Rings. I forgot. I just pictured him as, you know, the father, the man. So yeah, that was perfect. I thought the boy was great too, because in the book the boy has a very innocent wonderment about the world, and I thought this child actor had that. So I thought the boy casting was great too.
Yeah.
Plus, a nice bonus, he really does resemble Charlize Theron
Oh yeah. Yeah.
physically. So
So they were saying that the reason why he was picked in part was because of his resemblance. There was a couple other kids that really, you know, fit the role, but none of them really looked like Charlize Theron. And so they ended up going with him because not only did he fit the role, but he resembled the mother. So
yeah,
I thought that worked perfectly too. And yeah, I thought as far as like the way, again, I watched the film first, and so I'm tainted when I reflect on the novel. But I thought everything fit perfectly with his look, his behavior, his demeanor. There's a couple really interesting notes that I wanted to bring about that kid. That scene where man was wiping off the blood after he had killed the guy that pulled a knife on boy.
yeah.
They had to do that scene so many times, and it was so cold that the crying was actually the real crying from the kid. He was actually crying because it hurt him so much. It
Oh
wasn't
wow.
acting at all, which is kind of messed up. They use that take, but if it works, it works.
Yeah.
Viggo Mortensen actually starved himself intentionally, and he would sleep in his clothes in order for this role. Like he was going to give up all acting altogether until he found out about this role, and then after
Oh
this role,
wow.
he gave up acting for 2 years. He was actually thrown out of a shop in Pittsburgh because they thought he was a homeless man.
Holy
Like,
cow.
this is
Wow.
post Lord of the Rings, right? I mean, this is Viggo Mortensen in his height of acting, like notoriety and recognizability. And they're like, "You're a homeless guy. Get the hell out of my shop, dude." He's like,
Wow.
"What?"
It almost rivaled like a Christian Bale.
Yes.
I'm blanking on the
Machinist.
name of it. Yes, thank you. That it
Yeah,
kind of reminded me of that, just the physical transformation along with the encapsulating the character. So
absolutely.
he crushed it. Yeah, I thought the casting was spot on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the boy run the role partly due to the audition tape that he sent in by Cody's father, and they had shot the scene just between the two of them, his dad and himself, about teaching him how to kill himself with the revolver, and that
Oof.
film tape was partly the reason why he got chosen, in addition to, you know, how he looked and how he could act and stuff. And so the father actually ended up being one of the Ravagers on the truck at the very beginning of the film,
Oh,
which I thought
okay.
was kind of fun. They just threw the dad in there for fun.
Yeah.
The Viggo Mortensen and Cody Smith McPhee would eat crickets in order to bond on set as man and
Oh,
son.
wow.
And like the whole time, whether it's in the novel or whether it's in the film, there's always this assumption of, is that your boy or is that your father? You know, whenever anyone ever asks or anyone ever they have any interaction with anyone else, it's always like, does he belong to you? And so there's a lot of different reasons why people would ask that. Because nowadays, if you're like walking down the street with a kid, you assume, oh, that's the father, or that, you know, they're related or something.
Right.
In this world, it's very much different. It's like, is that your food source? Is that like, you know what I mean?
Jeez.
Is that
Yeah.
something worse? Like, is it someone you're protecting, or is it something we could barter? Or, you know, it's like a whole different conversation, which is very fucking creepy to be having.
Yeah.
But I can't help but think of that. Did that ever come up in your head when you were watching this and they were asking?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you said that. I never noticed when they kept asking, "Is that your father? Is that your son?" But it makes sense, you know, when the mortality rate is 99.9%, the chances of two people surviving that are related to each other are pretty slim. So it makes sense that they would ask that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, until you brought that up, I hadn't considered that.
So let's talk about the state of the world really quick, because in the book, in my mind, the state of the world is a result of uh, environmental disaster. And that could be exacerbated for a number of reasons, but whatever the reasons are, I thought it was a natural thing. The way in the film, I believe they presented the idea of a gigantic flash and then things falling out of the sky. And so that could be nuclear fallout, that could be asteroids hitting the planet, it could be literally anything like that. I mean, again, natural environmental things would be asteroids falling out of the world, but I thought it would be like man made or something like that. Did you get any indication watching the film or reading the book how this ended?
Yeah, there was a line in the book, and shoot, I wish I had written it down. It alluded to the fact that it was one flash of light followed by several concussions. I think that's how it's
Yeah, yeah.
phrased. So to me, it sounded like one event. In other words, if it was a nuclear winter, I feel like it would have to be multiple detonations in order to
Right.
affect the entire United States. So to me, I was thinking a meteor, very similar to what killed the dinosaurs,
Right.
supposedly. And that makes sense because supposedly that's what happened, is that the cloud covered the earth and then vegetation died out and the sunlight. So that's how I read it. And the author made a point, seemingly in the book version, of not to harp on it. And I was glad the movie
Yeah.
did that too, because I think it takes the focus away. If
Mhm.
they tried to make it like an environmental message of like, man is evil because there's too much consumerism or whatever, or I just feel like it would take the focus away. The focus needed to be on the father and the son. So I love that
Absolutely.
the movie piggybacked off the book and just kind of left it vague.
So the log line of the film is: in a dangerous post-apocalyptic world, an ailing father defends his son as they slowly travel to the sea. The framing of the novel and the film really is just based around survival and trying to go south. When you reflect on this film, what do you think the not necessarily the meaning behind anything, but what do you think the main point of this film was? Was it the journey? Was it the engagement between the characters? Was it just survival and the difficulty of survival in this sort of environment? Like, what do you think the main point of the film was?
So I was so encapsulated by this book and movie that I did kind of look for interviews with the author,
Oh, nice.
and he seems to kind of downplay it. He seems almost self-deprecating, where he says that it's really just a story of a man's love for his son. Apparently, the author had Cormac. Oh my gosh,
McCarthy?
McCarthy. Thank you. He had a son later in life, like in his 60s, I believe, or
Wow.
70s. He had a son at that age. So he was just kind of reflecting on his own mortality and watching his son. So I think, according to his words, it's really simple. To me, I think he's being very modest. I think it actually does have a much bigger morality to it. And I think the carrying of the flame is, you could look at that in a religious context, or just the fact that humanity, it just seemed like the father initially was teaching the boy about, we are the good guys and we have to help people. But throughout the movie, he kept getting further and further removed from that. There was the old man that he wanted to just leave, and the boy made him give the old man food. And then later with the person who robbed them, and then he left him without clothes or food or anything, and then the son made him go back and at least try. So I felt like the boy represented some sort of morality that the father initially instilled upon him, but then kind of had gotten away from. So to me, one of the morals of the story is that humanity has kind of gotten away from that morality, and that we
Oh,
kind of have to
interesting.
get back to it. And if we are, and we're able to reconnect with our fellow man, we'll be rewarded for it. It's kind of the way the boy was rewarded by finding that other family at the end. So I took that as the message. I'm kind of an optimistic person,
Yeah.
so I actually had some theories that I do actually feel the son is gonna be okay,
Oh,
which I know
good.
it's hard to take from that
Yeah.
because it's such a bleak environment. But yeah, I had an optimistic ending in my mind.
Wow. Yeah, there's definitely the religious connotation that can be applied because of the dialogue used. So the father straight up tells in monologue, sort of voiceover, that if this boy isn't the voice of God, then God never spoke. He Eli called him an angel. You know, I thought I had died and I saw an angel when I saw your boy. So it is that idea that this boy represents, and I like how you're saying that that fire and the kid sort of represents the morality that's lost in a way, or is trying to, you know, force him to maintain the morality they started with, because the boy does really symbolize man's morality in that sort of the purest sense, and along with that is naivete. I mean, the truth is
Right.
you can't survive in this type of world acting as that boy wanted to act. You were going to starve if you give your food away. You're going to be murdered or have your stuff taken from you if you bring foreigners into your camp. If you go to save everyone, you're going to be murdered. So there are the idea of morality through the son's eyes, I thought, was an innocent, unrealistic version of morality that I also had as a boy. I think everyone does as kids. You think, well, why can't you just help people and just the world will be better? And the father, of course, you want to instill those ideas in the kid, but then those wonderful ideas are going to then be tempered and hammered and shaped by the environment, by society, by your culture, by your own parentage. And so I think the world was adjusting the boys' expectations as they went along, but the initial father's teachings never did. And so the father was a representation of the reality, and the boy was the representation of the inherent optimistic view of existence. And I like the
Right.
idea that the father was continually trying to maintain that more innocent approach to reality, but that he couldn't in all cases for very obvious reasons. If it was just him alone, I think he would have been infinitely worse and maybe even ate people if he never had the kid in the first place.
Yeah.
But because he had the kid, because he had that responsibility, he felt like he had to do his best to live up to some expectation that either his father set for him or he thought he should as a father, whatever it is. So do you think that the boy is literally a boy, or do you think he is a metaphor for the father?
I think he is a metaphor for the father. I think the father starts out trying to instill these virtues in him, but he doesn't stick to them. Every chance that he gets, it's the boy who tries to bring him back
Yeah.
to say, you taught me this way. Why aren't we, acting upon it? And it is definitely a naive way of looking at the world, but I feel like the author's point and the movie, piggybacks because they did such a good job sticking to the book, is that maybe we've gone the other extreme where we kind of need to go back more towards the boy. Maybe not all the way because that it is a naive way of looking at it, but we've gotten so far away from helping, and the prejudices and biases have gotten so much the other extreme that we need to act more like children. Children are magical, like you mentioned in your book review. And whether it's a religious context where there's many, religious sections of the Bible and things like that reference, from the mouths of babes and look to the children, or even just the fact that children are born with this beautiful view of the world that gets hammered away over time. It's just, I think something that, maybe we should strive more towards, maybe meet in the middle at least, or, get back on to a balance.
Yeah, it's rough because trying to contextualize the message outside of the post-apocalyptic world, I think is a little bit unfair because, again, we're not in those situations. And so, if we were in that situation, I think I would definitely be more like the father. I mean, I would just be wildly protective and self-centered because I'm just thinking of my son and my survival. And so you have to be self-centered if you want to do that. And the other side is in the real world, then yeah, I think aspirationally, I would like to be more like the son. Not sort of like helping everyone for, love's sake, but people that I discern that are worthy of my own care and love, then I'm going to reach out and, help them if they need help, or at least offer help and stuff like that. So I do think we have to sort of look at it in those different lenses of real world versus the fictional world. because it does change the way that you perceive, and or that should be perceived, I think. Because there's one thing about aspiration, but aspiration in our world is very different than aspiration in theirs, you know?
For sure.
Especially in a time where humanity went south quick. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how long, you know, let's say he's 8, 9 years old. 8, 9 years old, and the world goes to eating people. Like,
Yeah.
that's all it took was 8 or 9 years. And people were just like, well, I never liked Frank. Let's eat Frank. I feel like it might take a little bit longer than that, but then you watch, you know, or read books like Alive or see films like Alive, and or The Donner Party, and you're like, all right, you know, a harsh winter, you might start eating people. I don't know. Where do you land on the idea? Because put it in the context of Donner Party, put it in the context of this film. How long do you think it would take you, if ever, to eat another human's flesh?
I mean, I'd like to think that I don't think I could ever do it, but you see some of the people that were locked up in the basement of that house.
God, yeah.
And that's one of the few times I thought that the movie surpassed the novel, because it was, even like as I pictured it in my head reading that passage, it wasn't as brutal as actually visually seeing it. Yeah. So, I mean, if you try to put yourselves in that mindset where your humanity is completely gone and it's eat or be eaten, like, Frank's looking pretty good at that point. And you rationalize, it sounds like Frankfurter, you know, it's a hot dog guy, he's got to go first. So, yeah, I'd like to think that I wouldn't, no matter how bad it got, but you look at those people and it's like nothing is off the table. Yeah. Your humanity is gone and you're just an animal.
Yeah, it's weird because, like, I'm going to be having dinner late and I'm already thinking, like, maybe I should eat someone. No, I think I would definitely go to cannibalism 100%. I wouldn't be proud of it. I wouldn't be happy about it. I wouldn't look forward to it. But if it's literally the only way you can survive, now here's the difference. Would you go to cannibalism sooner or later if the people were already dead? Like, would it ease your mind if they were already dead?
Oh yeah, they would have to be.
Versus having to kill them and field clean them and ugh. Yeah, that would be rough.
I think I would rather take the shock, the bullet first than actually having to murder someone and have to live with that. I don't think it would be worth it.
Especially when you think about, like, this is a practice that has happened since the dawn of time. There are tribes that still eat their enemies, like, it just happens. Because that's how they see, not only are they respecting the warrior culture that they live in, but they're also consuming the warriors that they just defeated strengths. And so, like, there's literally islands that man is not allowed to go on because the natives are cannibals today. And I think that's so fascinating that we live in a world with the highest of technology and society and then the most primitive at the exact same time in history.
Could you let me know what islands those are? Because I have some vacation time coming up. I don't want to go there. I'm very plump.
Oh man, just cut the flank steak. Leave the rest, please. I just want to look slimming in my bathing suit.
That is brutal. Yeah, I can't imagine that's actually going on. Yeah.
But I mean, you know, there's like third-party countries that send aid to them, and you know, I think it's maybe even Australia or maybe it was Great Britain that was doing it originally from Australia. But I don't know if it's happening today, but I know within the last decade it was happening, the last 10 years. Wow. Pretty crazy stuff. Anyway, so, I mean, the narrative of this is just survival. I mean, they're ultimately, you know, as far as A to B to C, they're going to different locations, traveling south, and we're introduced to different set scenes, whether it's an abandoned farm, whether it's a house that has a bunch of human meat in the cellar, whether it's... now, the scene that they took out that I understand, but I kind of, in a grotesque way, want to see it. They filmed the scene about the infant on the spit, the roasting spit.
Oh, yeah.
But they didn't include it. And I understand 100% why they didn't, because that's going to ruin some audience members. They will never be able to unsee something like that.
Right.
But it does add a level of depravity to the world that isn't there otherwise. Like, it's one thing to say, I'm going to eat another human. It's another to say, I'm guiding this pregnant woman so that we can cut the baby out and eat it. Like, that's a whole nother level. And so,
Yeah.
do you need it? No, I don't think you need it to explain how bad the world is. Is it something that you think you would have been able to sit through and watch if it was included?
I don't think so. Having a 2-year-old now myself, a baby girl, I think that I'd have to. I would have fast forwarded. I wouldn't have
Yeah.
like stopped watching, but I think that would just be too brutal.
Mm.
And I feel like they couldn't have shown. I was thinking in my head, could they at least have shown the women who were pregnant and kind of like if you were a fan of the book, you would get it. But I
Right.
think if they showed people that were pregnant without showing the baby on the spit, then it almost seems too optimistic.
Right.
So I think they had to
Right.
not show the pregnant women at all. So I think they probably made the right choice.
Mhm.
And it was they conveyed the the desperation of. I think they did a good job with everything else. Yeah.
My biggest complaint about this is that it seems too real. There was no light. There's no sunshine. There was no green anything. There was no insects. There was no other animals at all because, of course, unless it's being fed by someone, it's food for someone. So I love that we didn't even see a dog until the very end because that's the first thing after the pigs. Like, you're going to be eating Fido for sure. And I love my dogs. But if we're starving, I will eat them like 100%. I don't want to. I don't like it, but it's just like humans. I would eat a dog before a human 100% every day.
Except for Frank. Frank is going first.
Yeah. Well, he's also kind of a jerk. So he kind of deserves it a little bit. Poor Frank. All right. So let's talk about the differences that you noticed between that we haven't already discussed between the book and the film, because in my mind, it was really only the baby and the amount of time Charlize Theron was in it, the mother.
Yeah, some of the what I liked, and it's funny because I think having read the book first, maybe we just have different viewpoints on this. I loved a lot of the question answer format. It was short question of an innocent boy and then an answer by a father. I felt like they didn't do much of that until towards the end of the movie, and I kind of missed that because I love that connection that they had, where the boy is just wondering about everything. Everything is still magical, even in this evil, horrible world. And just these innocent questions. I was hoping for a little bit more of that. So I think that was one aspect that I preferred the book over that the movie left off. Also, I had a much different vision. I wanted to ask your opinion on this with the ocean at the end. From the vision I had from the book is that it was much more stagnant and smog covered, I think is how they described it. And in the movie, it's gray, sure, but it's seems like a normal ocean. It's currents and everything like that. You could almost imagine that it's teeming with fish underneath the waves. It didn't have the appearance of being completely barren.
Right. Interesting. Okay. I did not think about this, so this is kind of new in my head. I don't think I don't, because a lot of this is suspension of disbelief. They're shooting in real places. They didn't do a ton of CGI work. They only had $25 million to work with for the whole film.
Sure.
And so because they were trying to do everything practical, which I really, really respect, they only did very, very little CGI work at all. And but even then, I feel like the oceans are a direct result of the land, right? So I couldn't, when I was watching it, I wasn't thinking that there could be life under there. If there's no life on land, there's definitely not going to be any life in the sea. I mean, all of the air is contaminated. That affects the sea infinitely worse than anything else that we could do to it. All of the pollution, all the oil leaks, and everything that would be seeping into the ocean to discolor it and would also kill off any life and stuff. I don't think the currents would be affected because by and large, I don't know enough about geography, I don't think, but I think currents are more a result of natural weather patterns and our moon than it is like life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
So
guess
feel like-
it just.
I feel like it would just keep going even if there was like no life in or out of it.
Yeah. I guess maybe if they had added like one scene of him like throwing a net and just it seemed like it
Oh,
was
right,
worth the effort
right.
of trying to see if there was anything, because life supposedly started in the sea,
Yeah.
and I felt like that would be the last place for it to be wiped away. So I feel like that would be their best source of food.
Right. That's a good
You
point.
know, but that was a minor, I mean, very minor complaint. Just I pictured it differently from the book. I pictured almost like they had that one scene where all the logs were like turned over in like a
Yeah.
bay or something like
Yeah.
that. I kind of pictured the sea to look like that, and just
Okay.
being very depressed when they first see it.
Yeah.
And to me, I was like, no, it's not so bad.
Yeah. Well,
This
it
could
is a
be
real
fish.
shoreline too.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, that's a good point though, because the first thing I think of when I think of survival is getting to a lake in the mountains and like living off of the fish supply and the animal supply around. Like that fishing
right.
is a very important. That's why most cultures lived near the shoreline or near a river or near a lake, because not only do you need the water to live, it was a huge abundance of life for you to eat. So yeah, that would make sense that he would at least try. Like he swam out to a ship. So,
Right.
and in the book, he did it a couple times. So why not grab that rowboat, take your boy out into the ocean, and see if you can catch anything?
Yeah,
It's just a
that's what I
day's
thought.
effort, you know. And if you don't, you don't. If you do, then you know you can actually sustain yourself on this shoreline.
Yeah,
I thought it was weird that it seemed like in the film it seemed like they lived on the shoreline without worry about other people. But the entire time traveling to the shore, they were constantly worried about other people. And I thought that was really like unrealistic. It seems like the shoreline would be where everyone went.
right.
Everyone would go south to the warmer climates because that's near the equator. So why would that be less dangerous? And you let your guard down less? Like, it seemed crazy to me. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe they thought that everyone would stay to the cities, thinking like that's where you have the most apartments, the most houses, the most condos. So that's where you're most likely to find canned goods, and maybe by the beach. If you knew for a fact that the seas were devoid of life, which
Right.
I'd like to see them try, but if you knew that that was not the case, then your best chance of getting food is still those canned goods, which are going to be more likely in the city.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what they thought. Everyone would stay in those high population areas, and the beaches would be safe.
I
But
dig
yeah,
it.
that was
I
odd.
dig it.
Yeah,
I mean, speaking of canned goods, let's talk about the bomb shelter and the food storage place.
yeah, that was going to be my favorite scene. That was my
Yeah.
favorite moment when they find that, and this is one of those things that the movie does better than the book, because just the joy in their faces. And just that sense of you could take a breath as an audience watching the movie.
Yeah.
And for him to make his son breakfast,
Yeah.
it was one of those things that, and this is why the movie has stayed with me all week. Those types of moments where it's like, God, I take so much for granted. The fact that he's able to have breakfast with his son and talk to his son was just so beautiful, and they conveyed that so well in the movie.
Yeah. Also another really, really great scene, which might be my favorite son moment, when he woke his dad up from that wonderful dream to tell him not to touch his stuff. I was just like, yes, because the kid has nothing, and any little trinket, any semblance of an idea of individual personhood, that
Yeah,
doesn't exist in his entire life, and so the only thing he can attach to, well, this is me, are these tiny little trinkets that he collects, and
right.
so yeah, that makes sense. Like you think about kids about the time they get to like the double digits, they start individuating from the family, and some are more than others, of course. But like in my own personal experience, not only just me doing it, but also my kids, they completely separated themselves, and I completely separated myself from my family as much as possible because I wanted to figure out who I was, and I didn't really enjoy being around them that much. And so I always like sort of locked myself in my room space, which was just an unfinished basement where I grew up, and then they would lock themselves in their room where they grow up. And so like I I don't feel like is quite there yet, but the fact that he has these trinkets that he considers his own that no one else should touch means he's on that path to that. And I just felt like
Right.
that was just such a believable moment for character development for that child, that,
Yeah.
yes, he finally has a semblance. Because let's be honest, as much as you may love your father or you may love your son, both of those are going to want some me time, and at least a little bit. And in this
Sure.
world, that's not possible. Like, a child with me time means they're in danger. So you are constantly with them. And I can't imagine constantly being with my father. That would drive me insane. And I can't imagine my son wanting to be around me all the time. Even when we go camping and we're out in the mountains for a couple days, you're not constantly next to each other, grabbing each other, pulling each other along, like protecting each other. They go
Yeah.
wander off in the woods or down by the lake, and you sit by the fire and make some food, or like you're separate.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, were you really, really tight where you feel like you'd be okay living a life within that proximity?
No, I agree with you. I think that's so important for your mental space. And and also I think it makes you a more interesting person when you have separate time, and then you have separate experiences, and then when you get back together, you have something to talk about.
Yeah.
I think when you're on top of each other all the time, I think your individuality is lost a bit, because you're different with different people. You're different with your friends than you are with your kids. So I think you lose that part of yourself when you're only with one person the whole time. And in this world, that was a necessity. So I think a lot of the father was probably lost because his only focus was his son. So it just one more example of the sacrifices that he made for the love of his son, which is beautiful in itself.
Yeah. I distinctly remember a moment where we just had our son, first baby. And so we were stationed over in Germany, completely isolated and alone, not just from our family, of course, by the ocean, but also from the rest of the base, because we lived off base and we were about 15, 20 minutes away from the base. And so we were completely isolated amongst the military community and our own family. So it was just me, my wife, and our brand new infant son. And trying to deal, because he was colicky when he was first born, trying to deal with that was a nightmare. Like, it was really, really, really difficult. I mean, it was infinitely more harder for my wife because I could go off and go to work. I had to. And so she was home all day, every day. So when I got home, I would try to, alleviate that load a little bit. But I found moments where he's just screaming in the middle of the night, and I'm exhausted from doing field missions, and I have to go, back in to do PT in the morning, and like, I'm just like, will you shut up? Like, I don't understand why you're crying. I can't. What can I do to help you? Like, please help me help you. He's in a situation in this film and in the book where it's not that bad because, again, the kid's at arguably the best age to be with a father-son dynamic when they're young and, curious and excited to explore. And the next best would be when they're a young adult and an adult. Then you have a really different dynamic. But it's still, as a father, you're just like, I can't help you. Like, how am I supposed to save you from this world? How am I possibly supposed to deal with this? And so they make this sort of like inner pact, and really it's just the father saying that they're going to do that, is if we get in a situation, I'm going to kill myself, you're going to kill yourself. If I'm not here, you need to be able to know how to handle this gun in order to kill yourself. Because if you don't kill yourself, you're going to experience things that you should never experience. So you have to do it, or else you're going to experience something horrific. I don't think I could ever be that person to teach my son how to do that. And I like in my head, I'm like, okay, if I'm Viggo Mortensen as the father, would I be able to do that? I don't think I would. It's a step too far in my mind to teach them how to kill themselves. The whole point of what you're doing is survival. So you teach them how to survive. In a sort of ridiculous way of framing my point, when I was in motorcycle school, learning how to ride motorcycles and get my license, someone raised your hand and said, well, you guys never taught us what we're supposed to do when we wreck. And the instructor was like, no, I'm teaching you how not to wreck.
Yeah.
Like, wrecking is not an inevitability. I know everyone says it is, but I'm teaching you how to ride a motorcycle so you don't get in that position. Like, if you get in a wreck, there's not much you can do other than your protective gear. So there's nothing to teach. But like him teaching his son and showing him all these things, he should be teaching him how to survive, not how to end his life. I get where he's coming from, but
Right.
it was just like, and maybe that's intentional in order to sort of prep us for this father is slowly degrading. You know, his morality is leaking out because of the
Right.
situation. I don't know. How did you take that?
Yeah, I mean, I know in his head he's thinking of what's best for his boy. He
Yeah.
doesn't want to see him eaten slowly or raped or both. So he's trying to do what's best, but it requires a certain level of strength that I know I don't have. And it was really exemplified beautifully in the scene in the bathroom where
Yeah.
he actually has the gun to the boy's head because he doesn't think the boy will be able to do it himself. And he even
Oh.
says, I can't do it, which was good because it shows that, you know, his humanity, like he's as strong as he tries to come off. He couldn't go to that level, which I couldn't either. So I thought that was handled beautifully in the movie, and I don't think it was portrayed that way in the book where he had the gun to the boy's head like that. If it was, I didn't read carefully enough,
I'm
but
not sure, to be honest.
yeah, I thought that was really well done,
Yeah.
and yeah, it shows that the man, you know, Viggo Mortensen, the man had the father had weaknesses, which is realistic. All
Yeah.
the characters were well rounded in this.
Let's talk about that a little bit because we're
Yeah,
really only presented with two characters. The son, in his infinite innocence and curiosity, he even sees other people. He's like, Papa, Papa, I want to go see the boy. And he's like, what are you talking about? He's like, a boy. He's like, what boy? There's a boy right there. I saw the boy. He's like, forget about it. Because even if the boy was real, it's it's what am I trying to say? It's a potential disaster in the making. It could be the boy of a team luring them into a trap. It could
right.
be a boy waiting to kill them himself. I mean, it could not be a boy at all. It could be a man, and he just mistook. It could be
Even
no
best
one at
case,
all.
yeah, even best case scenario, if it is a boy who's you know, a friend for his son, it's still an extra mouth to feed, and he may not be able to find enough food for both of them. So
Yeah.
even in the best case scenario, it's not a positive thing in his head
Yeah.
to find this boy.
So I feel like I did sort of jump over. I know I'm bouncing around a bit, but we started talking about the fallout shelter, and I didn't really dive in the way I wanted to because once they started hearing the dog and they started hearing people and they said, nope, that's definitely a dog. And then we see the end of the film and they said that they've been following for a long time and you see that they have a dog. Do you think that was them up there or do you think it was just anyone else?
I do, because I think the likelihood of there being two dogs in a small region, given the way the movie and the book presents, you know, how bad things were, is unlikely. One thing about the vet at the end of the movie, it was portrayed this way in the book. I wish they had shown it in the movie because I thought it was important. Is in the book he's described as having a ski parka that was gray and yellow, and I don't think that was really the way it looked in the movie. But I thought that was so key because I thought like the yellow kind of represented carrying the fire. I think it was the author's way of
Oh,
saying
interesting.
that this is a good guy because it was really the only source of color throughout the whole movie or throughout the whole book,
Wow.
and also or just the sunlight breaking through the gray. You
Yeah.
know, maybe I thought it kind of represented hope. So
That's pretty cool. I didn't even pick up on that.
again, I have a very optimistic
Yeah.
viewpoint of things, so I might just be looking at it through that lens. But I did think that they were following him. But I thought the ski parker comment was noticeable because the boy wouldn't, you know, he wouldn't know what skiing is, what a ski parker looks like. So for the author to describe it, I think that was his way of saying that maybe the veteran and his family lived in the mountains and they were able to see these campfires, the boy and the son, and they were following them because he makes a reference in the movie and in the book where he says, we had to decide whether we were going to come get you, something
Yeah.
to that effect. So it definitely insinuates that they were following them for a while.
Yep.
Probably that was them above the bunker.
Yeah. I thought so too. And I think I do think it was kind of like obvious and meant to be, you know, us to make that connection. I'd never made that parka connection. I think that's a great point. And that would have been really, really nice to throw in the film because it would have been the only splash of color. And it
Yeah,
really would have drawn your attention in the same way that Shyamalan uses a red doorknob, for some of his stuff and just sort of pull your focus.
right.
So you took the ending, you already mentioned that it was going to be a positive ending.
Yes.
Other
I
than
ha-
the family and the kids, is there other reasons why?
yeah. So the veteran says you'll be all right to him, just the way the father said to him.
Mhm.
And I thought that was meaningful that he used those same words, that this is definitely a good person. The fact that they were two kids and a dog is almost like a luxury in
For
this,
sure.
it's like the Maserati of this world. If you could manage to keep a dog alive, you have ample source of food, not just for your two kids. He had two kids and your wife, but you could actually extend it to another animal. So that
Yeah.
tells me that he's capable as a provider. It also, the fact that he had shotgun shells that were
Freaking Chewbacca bandolier.
yeah, it shows that he was able to. He's like a builder, that he was able to craft these shotgun shells
Yeah.
or makeshift shotgun shells. So, I just feel like the boy's going to be in good hands. They do also reference in the book. I forget if they do in the movie, where he says like over time he was talking to the mom, and the mom asked him to talk to God, but he said, "Could I just talk to my father instead?"
Yeah.
But that indicates the passage of time. So he at least survived for some extent of time for that conversations to have taken place, because you wouldn't have multiple conversations in a day or two. Like
Right.
there had to be a passage of time. And the fact that the guy had a ski parka, he's probably from the mountains, and I feel like that could be a source of food. If you're at a higher elevation, there could be some food. In fact, in the book, they use the term brook trout. It was in the very last paragraph. I want to get the phrasing right. Something to the effect of there was brook trout in the water. There were days when the ashen overcast thinned, and now the standing trees along the road made the faintest of shadows over the snow. So that if you have shadows, you have sunlight. So I actually had an optimistic viewpoint that things were already getting better. The father had found a light meter that he
Yeah.
was looking for batteries for. So I think even in his mind, he was able to discern that the light was getting more and more pronounced, even in a short amount of time, for it to be discernible to him.
Nice.
So I really felt like things were going to improve. Maybe not in time for most people, but I don't know. I just had a good feeling that this family was going to survive somehow.
I like that. I didn't because I don't think the focus of the film is about what happened before, what happens after. It's just about the time that we have
Right.
with the father and son and in that dynamic. And so I never really thought about it. But you bring up great points, and I would like them to survive. And clearly, he survived for some amount of time. And there does have that. It sort of reminds me of the ending of The Exorcist, where you either end it with the tragedy or you end it with the police detective walking off and talking with a priest. And one is a lighthearted ending, making you think that, oh, well, evil can't dominate the world. There is still some silliness and fun and to be had and introspection. And the other is death and destruction. So I like that they closed with that with the family, because it does give you that semblance of, well, he's going to be okay for at least a little while. He's got people protecting him. He's not on his own. He doesn't have to try to survive on his own. I did really, really love the way that man addressed the boy, not like a child. I don't want your gun. I'm not going to try to take your gun away from you. You keep that. Just don't point it at me. If you're going to
Right.
come with us, you need to make a decision. You have two choices. You can either come with us or you stay on your own, but you need to stay off. Like, he was trying to help him the whole time, and he wasn't going to steal him. He wasn't going to abduct him. He wanted to make sure that this was this boy's choice, and he's just presenting the opportunity. You
Right.
make a choice on your own knowledge and experience. If you choose us, we're here for you. If not, here's some advice for surviving. I thought
Right.
that was great, because I think the worst thing people do to kids is talk to them as if they're kids. I always talk to my kids as if they're an adult, and I don't bring up adult stuff to them, but I speak to them as if I'm speaking to an adult rather than babying my language down or the way I talk to them down, because I think it's important for humans to grow and understand dialect and mannerisms and picking up on cues of body language. And you can't get that if you're doing little cutesy stuff all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I love that that's the approach that man took with the boy. I think it would have been easy for him to just sort of get on a knee and like, listen here, lad, and just sort of talk down to
Yeah.
him. Totally didn't do it. I loved it.
Which is also a good sign that he is a good guy, because he could have disarmed the boy. I mean, he took a chance kneeling down in front of him. The boy has a gun pointed at him, so that, and then there was also the thing where the boy asked him to put a blanket on his father.
Yeah.
And then the man said, stay here. And then he came back, and then the boy kind of like checked on him and went to go say a final goodbye to his father, which was devastating.
Yeah.
But he saw that the blanket was there, and blankets are like a really important source of a commodity in that world. So the fact that the man did it, and it went back to that line in the book: if you keep or if you break small promises, you'll break big promises, or something. Or if you make small lies, you'll make big lies later on. So the fact that the man kept his word is another sign that he is a good guy. The vet.
Yeah,
which I liked.
Let's talk about the very ending, because I thought what resonated to me was that the father in the novel said, I'm always with you. You can talk to me. Oh, this is going to get me. You can always talk to me. I'm sort of paraphrasing at this point to get it over with, but you can always talk to me. I'm always going to be there for you. And then it talked about how the boy continuously talked to him. And that's what I desperately want from my son and my daughter, is when I'm gone, they can just go up into the mountains and they can just be like, this is where he took me. This is where I can talk to him, Do you have something like that, like sort of in your mind with your kids? Like, is that something you've thought about?
Yeah, it crushed me too. I think if you have a son, especially just in the context of this story,
right.
It's hard not to put yourself in those shoes. And it's like the father, he promised the boy he'd always be there, and then the boy said, "You said you wouldn't leave," and the father said, "I'm sorry," which is such an odd thing to say because he has no control over dying. But the fact that he still felt apologetic about the fact that he had to leave his son, just really was crushing. And just thinking about that, as much as I'd always want to be there for my son, like I can't, no matter what I do. And I would just want him to feel that connection that we have, that he can talk to me still. So it's definitely this movie has given me something to strive towards, to build up enough of a connection where he could, talk to you even when you're not there. I mean, not even just after you're gone, but even, that you're in their head, that they have that connection where he thinks about what would you do, just crushing.
Absolutely. Well, let's wrap this conversation up here. And what would be your favorite part of this film?
The bunker scene, and where he makes his son breakfast, and it just reminds me of appreciating the little things. I mean, the efforts that these people took to get food, and then I could just go to a grocery store and there's 800 different types of every vegetable, every food. It's just I take it for granted too often, and so it's really just appreciate these moments and just build those connections with your kids. It's so important.
I think my favorite, it's tough because there's a lot of really, really great moments in this. I mean, some of them are devastating, but I still think they're like really, really great. Watching them sort of wash their hair and brush their teeth, and he puts that huge glob of toothpaste, and he's like, excited eyes, and just sort of cleaning themselves up. He's like rubbing like something out of his dad's ear, and watching the dad like cut his beard and stuff. That I think is my favorite. Is just they're just same exact point as yours. They're lavishing in this lifestyle that they didn't have moments earlier that no one has anymore except for the luckiest of people. And just to see their reactions, like they're actively starving. Like, there's no doubt about it. And even when they've eaten, they're still going to starve to death. So
Yeah.
it's just like this devastating situation that these tiny little moments really bring the joy out. Like,
Yeah.
I remember as a kid, my mom's friend had a bunch of kids that we would play with, but they were like, we were sort of middle class ish. They were very, very poor, like very poor. And so they would, like, we'd go over to their house and play with their kids because my mom and their mom were friends. And she would be like, here, have a marshmallow or something like that. I'd be like, no, I don't need it. You guys need it more than I do. And that's me sounding like an idiot kid, like it's just a stupid marshmallow. But I felt bad taking food from them, even though it's just a stupid marshmallow. I knew that we were okay and that they were not. Like, we would give our old toys to be wrapped up for them for Christmas and stuff. And it was just like having that perspective of knowing that you have it better than someone else that you're actively engaged with in moments. I almost felt guilty that I didn't deserve it, that, why did they not have it and I did? Or, like, it was just a weird dynamic. And seeing this kid just in this moment sort of be on that flip side where he's like, I get toothpaste? Yeah. Like, this is the greatest thing ever. It just made me appreciate it more because I had something in my history to sort of draw on in
Yeah.
order to get that. Have you ever had those moments where you just have, like, and maybe it's a soup kitchen that you give to, or maybe it's people you've walked down the street next to, where you're just like, wow, like, this is a huge disparity in lifestyles.
Yeah, we made a point with my son that for Thanksgiving we would buy food and we would actually take it and deliver it to the people's houses, and I made him do it because I thought it was important that he actually see
Yeah.
it's important to give back. We're lucky enough that we have food, too much, as you could tell
Oh,
by looking at me. But it was important that he sees that other people need it more than us, and to give back. They actually stopped doing that, I guess, because it might have been, embarrassing for the people. So you can't
right.
do that anymore. You're not allowed to actually, if you're doing it through the organization that we were doing it, which I can understand. But I thought that was important. I'm glad we did that a couple of years
Yeah.
because he did see that it was important. But the thing with the mom, like, even in this heart, like you mentioned with the toothpaste, those little moments, even in the worst world that you could imagine, which this is, there are still glimpses of happiness. So that's what's so frustrating about her giving up, is whatever amount of time that's good, you still got to try for those moments. And to give it all up, then there's nothing,
Yeah. I would never try to put myself in someone else's position. I had a friend who committed suicide, and I could never understand the pain that people go through when they decide to end their own life, as she did in this film. But I mean, let's just go to the least favorite. That was definitely my least favorite part, is that
Yeah.
I do think she was suffering from something, obviously, and it wasn't just like lack of optimism or depression. Like, it was clinical depression, not just environmental. And so
Right.
I think there was a reason she did it. It's just, in my mind, if you have someone as supportive as the man was and as joy-filled as the son was, how you could leave that voluntarily is beyond my understanding. And,
Right.
like, I just don't get it.
I'm with you. Yeah, that's my least favorite too, for a slightly different reason. I think I alluded to the fact that he's 8 years old and she's been
Yeah.
with him the whole time. Like, the way I interpret it in the book, it was like postpartum depression, which I apologize. I don't know the medical terms, but I didn't think that it lasted to 8 years old. Maybe
Yeah.
it does. Maybe it doesn't go away. So I apologize if I'm misspeaking, but the fact that he was that old and she saw him grow, and just as a parent, just to see like the magic of a child
Yeah.
growing and developing and being happy, even if it's for just moments a day because of that world that they're in, to see that and to walk away from it is just mind-boggling to me. And again, it might have been clinical and it was undiagnosed in that world, which would explain it, but it was just so difficult to see and just painfully frustrating.
Yeah.
I found myself mad at her, which is terrible if she's suffering from something,
Yeah.
but I couldn't help myself. I was mad. Yeah.
It's fair. You can't help how you feel about situations. I mean,
Yeah.
I was frustrated for sure with what she was doing, and it didn't make any logical sense to me. But then again, we don't know what the justification was, and whether we agree with it or not, it ended up happening, and so we had to deal with it as a viewer. So, all right. Well, is there anything else you wanted to cover about this?
Yeah, like I said, just I still have that optimistic viewpoint at the end, and I think that was kind of the message, besides just the love of a father and a son, which I think is the key part of it, is just the fact that maybe we all should try to strive to be a little bit more like the boy and reach out to help one another, and I think the world would be a better place. As bad as that situation was in that world for those people, there was no reason for them to eat each other if there was an alternative. There were mushrooms. I think at higher elevations there were trout, I think, as referenced. Just people needed to strive together and not attack each other and disseminate into the worst possible versions of ourselves. And we all need to carry the flame. That was what I got out of it. And I'm just so thankful that you brought this movie to my attention. It's obviously been out a long time. I missed the boat.
Right.
But I'm so thankful for this channel, and that you brought this. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for joining me. Let's give it a rating. If you had to give it a rating, what are you giving it?
A high as possible, which is 5 evil eyes.
5 disgusting, witchy evil eyes. And I'm with you right there. I thought this was devastating. It's brutal and it's beautiful. And it felt like it covered the whole gamut of human experience and emotion. And I felt like I experienced all of them by the end of the film. It just like totally drained, like, oh my gosh. Talk about a catharsis that I didn't even know I needed or expected. Just totally devastates you.
Yeah, I don't know how you watch it twice a year. Good for you, man. That is crazy.
I watched it twice this week.
Oh, yeah.
Which is pretty brutal. It is pretty hard, but still.
Eesh.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in. We'd love to hear what you thought about this. Go ahead and leave a comment below. Is it too sad? Is it too disgusting and just depressing for you? Or do you find aspects of it that actually enrich your life? I mean, do you find joy and optimism at the end of it? Let us know in the comments. We really appreciate your time and attention. And as always, remember that evil spelled backwards is live. So get your tookuses out there and be evil.
Maybe not leave naked people in the road evil.
That's a very good point. I would not do that.